So I see we have now 10 participants. So shall we start the webinar, hoping that more people will join further along?
Sure.
Okay, great. So thank you everyone for being here today. See, each time we start, we always have people coming in at the same moment. So yeah, thank you everyone for taking the time tonight to attend this this webinar. This the last webinar of the series on digital transformation of textile and clothing companies. Thanks, Jill, for being here with us. Today we will talk about ERP systems. The webinar will last approximately 90 minutes. Jill, I guess you will make a presentation, and at any moment, if there are any questions, I suppose we can invite people to write them in the chat or raise their hands, and we'll take the questions.
Please do. And because I'll be presenting on my screen, I won't necessarily be able to see the chat. So feel free to interrupt me. I don't mind. To let me know when people do have questions. And I would rather you feel like you can ask questions. Anybody can ask questions. And if I can't answer them at the moment, we'll wait towards the end. Or if it makes sense to answer them during the presentation, I'll be happy to do that.
Great, fantastic. Over to you then.
Okay, great. Give me one moment to get my screen set up and I will be right there. Okay. All right. Okay, give me 1 second here. Just here we go. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, fantastic. Great. Well, so thank you all. I think I've seen some of you at some of these webinars before, and so I'm looking forward to speaking with you a little bit more about this. And for anybody who's new to these webinars, my name is Jill Mazur. I am a consultant in the apparel and textile industries. I've been working in this industry my entire career. I work with companies to help solve challenges in their product design, product development, manufacturing, distribution, supply chain. I do a lot of work with technology, but I also do a lot of work with business processes. So internal operations at a company and why things might not necessarily be moving as efficiently as they could. The idea behind these webinars is to help companies such as yourselves to create a solid technology infrastructure and to be able to support your business growth. Working with ITC, they've given you guys many opportunities to engage with consultants, to benefit from webinars, to have one-on-one sessions. And so sometimes it's easier in a presentation like this to just cover a large set of information, and then if we move on to consulting, to focus on the areas that are specific for you. So I'm just trying to lay a foundation for solid technology and business infrastructure, and I like to have this as more of an interactive discussion. So if you have questions, as Delphine said, please put them into the chat and I'll be happy to answer them. So a bit of an overview of what I'd like to cover today is helping you understand best practices for successful ERP software. A quick overview of ERP, defining objectives for your project, helping plan for your project in terms of budget and resources and timelines, managing expectations, that's always a big one, in terms of training your people and managing change in how you work, as well as some next steps. Software implementations are a large undertaking, especially for smaller companies. To be truthful, software in and of itself doesn't solve any problems. It's up to each individual company to define what they need from a solution and to help find the software that best fits those requirements. Sometimes those requirements are very easy to define, such as I need software to track my accounting or to track my payables and my receivables. And sometimes those requirements are a bit more loosely defined, such as I need a design tool that can take a sketch and turn it into a pattern. In either case, it's important for the business to be able to define those functions and features it needs, and also take the time to research options that best fit your company's parameters. And as I said, it's helpful to know that hardly any solution will really solve all of your problems. But if you as a company can get 80% of what you need, and without having to customize your software, you're doing a great job, truly. So in terms of ERP, and ERP, just for me to back up very quickly, ERP is enterprise requirements planning. So it covers a wide variety of things. It can be sales orders, customers, managing credit, purchasing, invoicing, reporting, payroll, shop floor control, cutting tickets, work orders, and as well as manufacturing requirements planning. So how much raw materials do you need to purchase? So manufacturers are actually the #1 buyers and users of ERP systems. They've been using manufacturing resource planning systems for decades. So that's just essentially calculating what do you need in terms of raw materials to manufacture orders. And over 50% of companies are planning or have already started to add an ERP system to their business if they don't already have one. Part of the reason why companies need these is to cut down on the amount of manual work that it takes, to also to consolidate a lot of different applications you might currently be using or spreadsheets that you have to manage your business. And then also to take advantage of the latest technology and be able to interact globally with companies via the internet and communicate information instantaneously rather than taking time to have to calculate that information on your own. So back to this slide. So many companies are already doing what we call manufacturing requirements planning, or MRP. So whether you're doing that today on a spreadsheet or if you have software that helps you calculate that, what it does is it looks at all of your purchase orders. It looks at your inventory for your raw material. It looks at orders from your customers. It helps you determine how much material you need to manufacture your future orders. It doesn't actually help you plan that. That's a separate type of software that does production planning. But MRP is at the core of what we do in manufacturing. We have to know how much to purchase. We don't want to be sitting on excess inventory. We don't need to be sitting on, actually, we don't need to be rushing to try to get more raw materials in order to make a customer's order. So we want to be able to plan ahead and plan effectively so we're not spending more money or time than we need to. When I think about how ERP relates to a business, it looks a lot like this. So ERP would be this entire graphic here. All functions within an ERP system are interconnected, and they are also tied into a financial system for accounts payable, accounts receivable, financial reporting, and some ERP systems even have payroll in them. So if you are doing shop floor control and piece rate payroll, it can tie into your ERP system as well. So it manages inventory, it manages financials, MRP, as we talked about, purchasing, sales orders, and service to your customers and interaction with your vendors. When I speak about a technology landscape, it actually is a bit bigger than just ERP. So ERP is what we looked at just previously, but then companies such as yourselves also are doing patterns, marking and grading. So systems like Gerber and Lectra, which help with patterns, marking, grading, integrated cutting. You may have design applications. So whether your teams are actually designing products in-house using things like Corel Draw or Adobe Illustrator. Some companies are even using 3D software to take pattern pieces and create a 3-dimensional image of the actual garment on a physical form. Warehouse management. So if you have your own warehouse and you are shipping product out to your customers, or you are acting on their behalf and shipping directly to some of their retailers, you might need warehouse management system. Everybody has some sort of financial tool, usually that is tied into ERP. Sometimes it's a separate system if that's how you choose to work. Same with reporting, as well as e-commerce. So that is what allows you to create a website that allows you to interact with your customers. It allows you to interact with retailers. It can even allow you to interact with your vendors. Shop floor control. So a lot of you are currently using a shop floor control system to manage what's happening on your production floor. Planning tools to plan for future orders and to help optimize your production lines. Piece rate payroll, so how you're paying your operators for how they are performing. So whether you are paying them by the piece that they sew, or you have incentive programs to help encourage them to be more efficient in their production. Many companies are requiring vendor compliance. So being able to work directly with your customers as their vendor and making sure that you are in compliance for whether it is social compliance reasons or auditable reasons, testing reasons, things like that. B2B and websites. So that is a pretty extensive technology landscape. And I don't expect companies these days to have all of these things. Most companies that have this type of a landscape are multi-billion dollar US, multi-billion US dollar companies, not necessarily US companies, but very large companies that are able to manage this. And they also have a staff of people that are managing a lot of these systems. When I think about what that looks like, a lot of this sort of fits together. Again, these are also sort of parts and pieces that can integrate into ERP, or they may not necessarily integrate directly into ERP, but they may integrate into other systems, which then integrate into ERP. So I'd like to stop for a second and ask maybe a question or two here in terms of how many of you are currently using ERP systems today? So if you would want to put anything in the chat box, or if you want to raise your hands, please feel free to do that. And then beyond that, how many of those systems are specifically designed for apparel and textile manufacturing? So I'm going to stop for a second and take a look to see if we've got anything in the chat. Okay, so Jade Textiles is anybody else? Okay, Usama and Ayman, yes. Adam is looking forward to it. Okay, good. So Dia, good. This is, oh, Ayman, you were, but not anymore. You were looking forward to putting, oh no, that's a different one. Okay, you were using it. Not anymore. Got it. Okay. Everybody's looking for improvements. Okay. So Dia, you're using Garment.io that's specifically for apparel manufacturers. Is anybody else using an apparel or textile specific solution? And yes, okay, Usama is.
Hi, Jill.
Yes, hello.
Hi, this is Ayman speaking.
Ayman, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I just wanted to point out that we are using modules, scattered module now, because we had a bad experience with the old ERP system, and we are starting together. As maybe you remember that we talked before. I'm using some accounting modules and some inventory modules, and hopefully, yeah, I'll get something together.
Well, we can continue talking, and let's have a separate conversation about that. But I'll be happy to continue the conversation after we finish with this webinar, or separately. So please let me know.
Okay,
great. All right. So I can see where this can be very frustrating. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about apparel and textile specific ERP systems. So the challenge with ERP systems is that it was not designed for apparel manufacturers. And you guys all know that we make our styles in a size and color matrix, and sometimes we even have more dimensions than that. So whether it's an inseam for a pant or a bra with a cup size, or multiple other dimensions that are associated to our products, we are actually the only industry that has those requirements. Everybody else, if it's a different size, it's a different style. And so there have been a lot of ERP systems that have tried to modify themselves to support apparel and textile manufacturers to varying degrees of success. So that's why when I talk to companies such as yourselves, I really like to focus on apparel and textile specific ERP, because not only do they understand what we need in terms of this size and color matrix, and it's a little bit hard to see my graphic here, so let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger for you. But to be able to have a particular, sorry, let's see if I can pull this down here. To be able to have a particular style, a particular color, particular sizes for it, it doesn't always work that way within other ERP systems. And so it becomes challenging, especially when you start doing your manufacturing requirements planning and trying to look across multiple styles, multiple colors, all using the same raw materials. So there are specialized vendors and solution providers that have ERP specific solutions. And when they have those solutions, generally speaking, it's because they're working with a lot of other companies that have similar needs to yours. So even beyond where you're just looking at style, color, and size, we have industry-specific apparel requirements that only apparel and textile manufacturers really understand, and only the types of solutions that support apparel and textile manufacturing understand. It's challenging when you try to go into an open source ERP system, which essentially what that means is it's a basic ERP system and it allows you to customize it in any way you want. You do have to use somebody who understands how to code it, how to create programming code to set the system up for you specifically, which is also challenging when you need to try to maintain it. So that's why I generally like to focus on ERP that's specific for apparel and textile. I'm going to show some examples just quickly of some some reporting that is specific. Let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger. There we go. Specific for apparel manufacturers in terms of open orders, in terms of purchasing, and again, we're looking at fabrics and materials, and potentially we can be looking at it in our raw materials in sizes as well. So we might have a raw material that also has sizes and colors associated to it. Maybe it's zippers, can be buttons, and so on and so forth. Production tracking, being able to track by color and size for a specific style, and grouping everything all together so that I can see it all in one place and how much it is I need to potentially sew, how much do I need to receive, and so on. This is for work orders. This is, excuse me, something like work in process tracking again. So a lot of these systems do have, there we go, that's a little bit better here. A lot of these systems are just built specifically for our industry. They understand what we're looking for in terms of order acknowledgments, in terms of where we stand with cutting, sewing, inspection, packing, so on and so forth. And then, our favorite, our profitability reports. So just being able to get that kind of very specific information about what you're manufacturing is very important. Okay, here we go. So I wanted to talk about a couple of different companies that were having some issues in terms of how they are operating, or how they had been operating. And when they were able to find ERP solutions that met their needs, that they were able to support how they needed to operate, and they were able to solve a lot of the problems that they were currently having. So the first one is an American apparel manufacturer. They make protective apparel and textiles. So they actually make things for people for our firefighters, as an example. So they make fireproof materials, and they make fireproof clothing for firefighters, as well as some of our Coast Guard and peace officers as well. So they were using a lot of standalone spreadsheets. They had time and attendance systems. So it was essentially a working a punch clock. When people would come in, they would punch their ticket into the clock, and then they would keep punching the ticket into the clock as they finished their work throughout the day. They needed more flexibility to be able to see shop floor progress. Managers are spending a lot of time on administrative tasks like scanning tickets and tracking how people were working in terms of being able to create incentive pay for people who were performing better. And people in the office were just spending far too much time working on multiple spreadsheets to track payroll, production orders, purchase orders, and so on. So when they found the ERP system that they are currently using, when we worked with them to find the right solution for them, they were able to improve their inventory tracking by using shop floor control, integrating it with their ERP system. So they could see how their bundle tickets were moving through the production floor. They were scanning it at each workstation. They were able to account for their sewers and their cutters and everybody on the floor, their productivity, and they were able to calculate payroll very efficiently. It actually cut down the administrative time. We actually did a time study because at the beginning of this, they were telling me how many hours a day they were spending on pulling in all of the punch tickets and all of the receipts that they had, and they were able to reduce the time by 80%, giving their operators the ability to scan their own work on the floor rather than having to get up and punch their tickets. They were able to get their finished goods to their customers just faster. It was just easier for them to track everything, ship it out. They knew where they stood in terms of all of their raw material, all of their production orders, all of their work in process. And they were more efficient because they had a full picture of how they were operating. They got more time. They actually were able to they were able to take one employee and move them into a different area in the business because she no longer had to be spending all of her time tracking this information. She was actually being much more productive and helping build some business for them rather than having to track all of that information. And employees were happier because they could see their own information. The workers on the floor didn't have to keep getting up and punching tickets. They were happier. And they were able to increase productivity within 10 months. But by 10% within a month of using shop floor control. So I think for them, they were very happy with what they were able to do. And this wasn't a very large company, but it was somebody that was very specialized in what they do. And they really wanted to spend their time and effort making better products for their customers rather than having to put their time and energy into doing all the work that was related to that. One of the other things that I wanted to mention about with ERP is something called electronic data interchange. And for those of you who have been in another webinar with me, I was talking about EDI back then. But EDI is primarily used by manufacturers, vendors, brands, suppliers, and it's a set of standards in terms of how we communicate information back and forth between a vendor and a customer, in terms of how they send us a purchase order, how we take that purchase order and pull it into our system and can read the information that they're requesting, how we send that information back to them directly. And this is not through an email. This is not through a different piece of software. It's through what we call a translator. So it takes your information, it translates it into a standard, and then it sends that information to the vendor and back again to you. So it's a standardized way of working globally between all of these different types of companies and retailers as well. It provides automated purchase orders, sales orders. One of the big ones is shipment notification and invoicing. So it will automatically send a shipment notification when a shipment has left a warehouse. It will let a company know that they should be expecting a shipment coming in for receiving. It'll automatically invoice the customer as well. It doesn't automatically invoice the customer. You press the button to invoice them, but it will send that invoice automatically. So it reduces the time that it takes to get to them. And you also know that they've received your invoice. So no more can they say to you, oh, we never got that. We didn't get that invoice from you. We haven't paid it. You know that they've received the invoice. And so it provides better customer services. So most brands that are using EDI today are very efficient in the way that they are able to communicate back and forth. It's used, it increases accuracy, obviously, as you send the correct information, you know that they are receiving the exact information you sent them, as well as it cuts down on things like data entry. So you don't have to re-enter information that you receive from a customer. You don't have to re-enter information you receive from a vendor. It automatically is loaded into your system. And it creates better business relationships. It allows you to respond more quickly and effectively and accurately, which everybody appreciates. So to bring EDI into this conversation, my next case study is regarding ERP and EDI. So this is another American apparel manufacturer and is a smaller company. It's a startup, so they were in business for 2 years. They were using a lot of spreadsheets. They were one of these, I'm going to just call them quote unquote internet sensations, where they had designed a garment. Some celebrity was seen wearing it, and all of a sudden it was very hot and very popular, and they were overwhelmed. They didn't have the ability to fulfill orders the way they needed to, and they were starting to get orders from larger retailers, which was causing a lot of problems. So they didn't have an ERP system. They were using an accounting system. They couldn't address when these retailers were sending them these larger orders. They didn't have any real-time visibility to understand how many orders were coming in or how they could plan their production. And they were also having issues with their customers by not being able to send on-time deliveries or give them notifications when shipments were being sent. So for us in the US, that's a very big issue, to not be able to communicate with the retailers. Our retailers will give us a very small grace period, maybe a couple of orders. And if we can't get our acts together, if we can't ship them properly, if we can't notify them correctly, if they don't have the information that they need when they want it, they will find another brand to work with. That's just how things happen. So excuse me for 1 second here. So we found an ERP system for them. It's a very small ERP system, but it was apparel specific. It did have the ability to work with EDI as well. So to create these interactions between the different customers that they wanted to sell to, as well as some of the vendors that they were working with and their factories. And so in the US and China, they were able to reduce 30% of their headcount, or reallocate it to a different role through EDI, because they were no longer having to type orders in the system and constantly looking up information and constantly trying to be in touch with their retailers and sending that. Now the information was being sent automatically. They were able to process a much larger volume of transactions for sales orders, for purchase orders, for inventory, for invoicing, with fewer people. And they actually were able to get new business. So because they had the tools to be able to do this and to track their own production and communicate with their retailers, other retailers were finding the brand, liking it, placing orders, and it was much easier for them to fulfill those orders efficiently. Okay, so in terms of what that means for you, these are different case studies and everybody's business runs differently. So everybody has their own unique challenges. But my question to you, and you don't have to put it in the chat, but it is something I'd like you to think about, is what does your business need to be able to run efficiently? So if you're thinking about ERP systems, what does your company want and expect from an ERP system? Is it greater efficiency? Is it better accuracy? Is it better visibility to your work in process, to what's happening with your vendors? These questions are only questions you can ask yourself. But when we're thinking about putting in ERP systems or what we want to do to improve our ERP systems, it's helpful to know this because these are the goals that you want to achieve. So whatever your goals are, whatever your objectives are, it's important that your management knows what the expectations are for the project. And it's also important to understand what systems will and won't do for your business. They don't solve all of your problems. So if you are having production issues, if you're not producing the quality goods that your customers are expecting, an ERP system might not solve that for you. That is something more in terms of your production and your operations. So just think about that and be aware of that. It's definitely not a magic bullet. It doesn't solve all the problems, but it is certainly an opportunity right now to identify and improve and redesign your business process. You don't want to take, if you're using spreadsheets today, I always tell people, don't expect to recreate your spreadsheet in your ERP system. It doesn't work that way. You want to have the opportunity to improve your business process. And by putting in an ERP system, it does allow you to make those types of improvements because you have the opportunity to add more features in, more functionality, better reporting. Maybe there's more data that you would like to see about your business that you can't track in a spreadsheet today, but by putting in an ERP system, now you have the opportunity to do that. So I always recommend for people to think about the challenges they want to solve today and also what you want to improve in your business. It's important to be able to do that. As far as the objectives for your company, it's important to not necessarily for you to physically create a project roadmap. Typically, your ERP vendor, when you're working with them, will help create that roadmap for you. You as a company will define what's the most important functionality to implement. So when you're putting an ERP, generally speaking, you can get all of the basic ERP functionality up and running at the beginning. So purchase orders, sales orders, inventory management, vendors, customers, accounting, manufacturing requirements planning, work in process tracking, reporting. All of that really does go hand in hand in an ERP system. A lot of ERP systems are actually modular now. So aside from that core ERP, so let's go back to this, I'll stay here. Aside from that core ERP functionality, a lot of them have additional modules that you can implement, whether you want to do it at the same time or if you want to do it later on. So many of them have shop floor control. Many of them have production planning. Many of them have even integrated PLM, so product lifecycle management, which is for product design and development. And they even have supply chain management. So these are additional modules that you can put in to your ERP system, whether it's the same time that you're going live with the basic ERP system or later on. And that's something else to think about when you're looking at ERP systems is, does it have this additional functionality that you can take advantage of? So as you grow your business, you might find that the next step that's important to you is shop floor control. Or for companies that are doing some of their own design work, putting in a PLM system can help you as well. So think about that when you're thinking about ERP systems and what this roadmap needs to look like for your business. So by determining what functionality is most important at the start, and also what parts of the company are going to benefit most from the software. So if it's your front office and your back office operations, obviously that's going to be crucial for how you operate. But if you can also think about how things might work on your production floor, that's incredibly helpful as well. Just like the example with the client that I had that had implemented shop floor control with their ERP system. They were able to increase their efficiency dramatically and cut down on some of their costs. So for them, it made a lot of sense to try to put that in at the same time. Okay, in terms of planning. So when you think about planning for your project, think about three things: budgets, resources, and timelines. Excuse me for 1 second here. Right now, I want to talk a little bit about budget. So there are a lot of ERP systems today that maybe 10 years ago, when we were looking at ERP, you were always looking at a very large upfront cost. So you would be purchasing software licenses, you would be purchasing hardware that you needed to run this on, you would be purchasing time from the consultants from the software company or external consultants that you would be using to implement the system. You would be looking at maintenance fees every year that you would have to pay for your software licenses. And so for those of you that are using Gerber and Lectra, you probably have had that already, where it was a very expensive upfront cost and you're still paying for it every year with that. With ERP systems today, there are a lot of companies that are more subscription-based. So for those of you who use, let's say, Microsoft Office 365 or Adobe Illustrator, you know that you are really only paying a fairly small monthly fee for however many number of users that are currently using the software. And it makes it significantly more affordable. And with an ERP implementation, you will still need to pay for the system implementation itself. You will still need to pay for somebody to configure that system or some bodies to configure that system for you and help train you. So there is that upfront cost when you're implementing the software. But now in terms of payment for services, that's generally boiling down to more of a monthly fee rather than a huge chunk of an investment. But here are things to think about. So when you think about budgets, even for smaller companies, this may all roll up into 1 or 2 people. But for larger companies, you might have to think about the salary of full-time people, temporary employees, if they're working on a project. If you have somebody traveling from one location to another, whether it's from one factory to another to either learn software or teach somebody else how to use software. There can be training fees, there can be materials in terms of software equipment, research, professional services, capital expenditures. So again, if you're thinking about software these days, a lot of systems are cloud-based, meaning they run in the quote unquote cloud, which all that means to you is it's available and accessible via an internet browser. So instead of having to have your own hardware and having your own servers and having people to maintain all of that and do backups for you, now if it's a cloud-based application, you just log in from anywhere on your computer or on your tablet or even sometimes on your smartphone, and you can access that information very easily. So you may not have any additional hardware purchases that are required. And then contingency, because sometimes software projects, no matter how well you plan them, they run over budget. And I think everybody has probably experienced that in one area of their life or another. We know that we budget for something, we know we need to budget a little bit more. I think a lot of companies do tend to underestimate the expenses involved with an implementation. And that for you guys, regardless of whether any of these here are apply to your business, training fees probably would, but you will need to prepare data. So you're going to be spending time, or somebody's going to be spending time taking your information, whether it's your customer information, your vendor information, styles you manufacture, raw materials you have in inventory. You need to gather that information and you'll be entering it into your ERP system. So that does take time. You'll also be testing the software. So it's not such, it's when the system is configured for you, you still need to make sure it works as you expect it to. You can't just expect the vendor to be able to read your mind and configure the system correctly the first time. So you will be spending time testing it, making sure that it's working correctly, making sure that the data that you gathered that has been loaded into the system is set up properly as well. And then training and support. So there will be multiple people in your company potentially that will be using one or more parts of your software, of the ERP software. And those people are going to need training as well. So when you take the time to budget correctly and think about the effort that it's going to take for you to get one of these systems up and running, it's important to be realistic about that. In terms of resources, so for larger companies, we sort of talk about it as an executive sponsor and a steering committee. And sometimes in smaller companies, that executive sponsor is the steering committee. So if you are the owner of the company and you're the one who's requesting the ERP system, you may also be the one that's making the decision in terms of how you want it to be run for the business. But then you will also have your actual team of people that would be working in the system. So I would call those your core team. And for small businesses even, it's important to involve your employees across the entire company, from your front office, in finance, manufacturing, and even in a warehouse, when you're looking at these systems, because you want to make sure that you know today it will work for your business, but you also want to make sure that tomorrow it will work for your business as you grow and as you potentially add these other modules into your system, that it supports all of the rest of your business requirements. So asking your business team to participate and maybe look at these demos with you, give their input to you. They're the ones that are going to be working on it. And if they're not happy using the system, they're going to probably find ways not to use the system. So that you don't want to waste your money finding a system that looks good to you as the executive sponsor, but doesn't work for the rest of your business. So keeping your business engaged on this is very helpful, and it helps ensure people are working with you to find a solution that works for the rest of the company. And then in terms of timelines, so this is kind of a good example for a smaller company. Excuse me one second. This is a good example for a smaller company. No matter what size you are, and no matter how many people, whether it's 1 user or 100 users or 1,000 users, you still follow these steps in terms of implementing an ERP system. You will spend some time doing what we call discovery and planning. So that's looking into an ERP system, doing some research, finding the right system for you, creating a project team that works, and also making sure that that vendor is the right vendor for you. I shouldn't say this, and I know we're recording this, so I find that software vendors are a little bit like car salespeople, except with car salespeople, you can see the car. and you can drive it. With software salespeople, it's a little bit more abstract. You can't actually see the software. You can see what they're showing you, but you can't see the software until it's really working in your own company. So you want to make sure that you find a company that has the right software for you, and that you feel comfortable with the vendor as well, because it's important. You'll be having a relationship with that vendor for as long as you have that software. So in terms of design, so that really is not designing a garment, but it's designing the system. And since most ERP systems that are for apparel and textile companies already have the functionality that you're going to need to run your business, there isn't necessarily that much you need to do in terms of designing a system, but you do need to make sure that it supports how you run your business, how your work flows through from start to finish in a system. And then taking advantage of new functionality in the software. So perhaps today you're using 5 spreadsheets to get to one crucial piece of information, and explaining that to the vendor and letting them show you how within their system, it only takes maybe 2 or 3 clicks of the mouse to get that same information. So it's important to be open-minded and take advantage of some new efficiency that you may have in the software. And then development. So development is the actual configuration of the system. And the way I like to describe configuration is it's very different from customization. So customization is actually taking the programming code behind the software application and changing it in some way to do something specific, which is expensive because it requires a programmer usually. And it's also challenging when you want to upgrade your software, because that code generally has to be customized again for you. Where configuration, when I think of that, I think of a smartphone, and I go to buy a new smartphone and I add all the apps that I want to my smartphone, and I configure a ringtone, and I configure a screensaver and a bunch of different things on my particular phone. So that phone is configured specifically for me. It didn't take anybody to break into my phone to customize it for me. I was able to configure it for myself. That configuring software just takes time. So you want to make sure that it's configured the way that best supports your business. And then testing. So again, no matter how small you are of a company or how few people are using the system, you'll still need to test it. So you've designed the application for yourself. They've developed the system for you. They've configured it the way you've asked them to, and now it needs to be tested. So you just need to make sure that the system is actually working the way you want it to before you're live in there, before you're actually conducting your business within the system. Deployment is the next step. So you do have to be aware that there are a lot of moving parts in software, and sometimes you can have some very confused employees. Despite your best effort in training, and despite your best effort in helping prepare them for change. So if people have been doing the same job for a very long time, it's always challenging for them to try to use a new system, and people get concerned, people get frustrated, people don't feel comfortable using the system. So there can be some challenges there. Your project team, which is your internal team, needs to be available to answer questions during this time when you're getting your system running and it's live. You need to be able to support your users and fix any issues. You'll also be working with your software vendor. So if you come across challenges while you're taking your system live, the software vendor is there to support you. Let's see. Excuse me. And then last but not least is support and updates. So, when you put in your system, you're still going to need support from your software vendor. So you might find a bug in the system. You may have a day where something happens that's unexpected, and you need to be able to call for support. And it's important that, again, when you think about that vendor that you're having this very long-term relationship with, that vendor is going to be able to provide the support that you and your business need. So your project team internally is responsible for your ERP system, and they will be working directly with the vendor in terms of support issues, but also understand that at various times the software gets updated and it also gets upgraded. If you're using a cloud-based application, so one where you're just accessing it through the internet, upgrades are very easy because it's just something that gets pushed from the software vendor out to your specific system. But again, you might need to come back in here and do some testing on it. They might have added some functionality that you haven't used before, or they might have added some unintended bugs in the system. They never want to send out bugs, but sometimes when you're using software for the first time, again, and it's been upgraded, you may find some bugs in there. So you may have to come back and do some testing once you do an upgrade. And you will have this ongoing support and ongoing updates. So the idea is if you're using a cloud-based application, you're always staying current. For systems, I remember a lot of systems like Gerber and Lectra back in the day, and maybe still today, you can have a very old version of Gerber or Lectra running because you bought it up front, and you might not have done any software updates to it, and you might not even be paying maintenance for it anymore, which can cause some problems if the system ever does have a problem, or if it ever does break down. You do want to be able to have support from your software vendor. So by staying current, and if you're just paying on a subscription basis, you're always current. So you'll always have the support, and you'll always be able to get your latest updates, which does make that significantly easier. In terms of a project, I mean, this is a very pretty graphic. It sort of typically shows you the way a project would work. So you start with your planning, your organization. This I may be looking at all of my data, my bill of material, my process flows, inventory, production orders, data, so on and so forth. And I may start trying to get all of that information together over the course of in the next couple of months in order for me to be ready to get all of my information into a system. So don't think that you have to do all of it at the same time. You won't be able to. You don't have the resources to do that. You're going to have to spend time looking at your current data, figuring out how you need to organize it, and figuring out how it might make sense to put it into a new system. And to me, one of the most important parts of any project is helping manage expectations in terms of your business. They're the ones that are going to be using the system. I recommend you involve them at the beginning and throughout the project, because if they aren't happy with what you're asking them to do, they are going to be very uncomfortable. So I always like this graphic here where everybody wants some change, but nobody actually wants to have to change themselves. So to me, when you're trying to do change management, it's important to keep them involved at the beginning, because then they feel like they have ownership in this project. They feel like they can ask for what they need. They can have their answers, they can have their questions answered, whether it's by you or by the software vendor. They can make sure that they're getting the support that they need to be able to do their jobs. When you go live with your system, that's just the beginning for your users. It's what happens afterwards that's critical to the success of the project. It's important to be able to plan and allocate your business, because you're now asking them to potentially do different work than they've been doing. and working in different ways. So they need to have support. And they need to have training, which is very important here. They need to be trained and comfortable to use the system before they go live and have the support once you are live in the system. And familiar with any of the new processes that you've put into place for them. So if you're asking them to change how they work, they need to understand how they're going to be changing and what the tools are that they're going to be using. Especially if when you're putting in the system, you might have a consultant that's helping you with that, but the consultant goes away. So the business needs to then take ownership of process and how things are working. And then as you add new employees to your company, they're the ones that you're going to expect to be able to train those new employees how to do those jobs as well. So here's some statistics that are not necessarily the happiest statistics, but they're important to understand. So there are one or two of you that I know of that have put in ERP systems and have found that they aren't working for you. You're not alone. Nearly 50% of ERP implementations fail the first time around. And that's a scary statistic. So what I'm trying to do with this webinar is help you understand how to be successful, how not to fail in your ERP implementation. They can take a lot longer than you anticipate. So again, that's why we're talking about how to plan for that project, what kind of resources you need, and also what I think the timelines might be, or what you think the timelines might be to be live in the system. And so I think today with budget and reality, I think when we're looking at these cloud-based applications and we're looking at subscription-based, I think we can say that budget and reality are a lot closer than this because our software vendors are pretty good now at anticipating how long a project would take for a company of your individual size, how many users you're looking to get on the system, what modules you're looking to implement. And they have had enough implementations that they're pretty good at giving you a good estimate in terms of how long it should take. In terms of budget, so here again, it says 65% of the time budgets go over because the system needs modification. But by finding apparel specific applications, and apparel and textile specific applications or ERP systems, we really are able to cut down on a lot of that because we already know that the functionality exists for you. You shouldn't have to customize any of the code. And the configuration for your specific business shouldn't be very difficult because the apparel specific solutions are already designed to support your business. Now, in terms of finding the right partner or the right vendor, excuse me. Again, I want to focus on vendors that have apparel specific ERP that can support that, not just that style, color, size, dimension, matrix, but understand how we in the apparel industry and the textile industry, how as manufacturers and as brands, how we work with our work in process, with our manufacturing requirements planning, with helping us with production planning, helping us understand shop floor control, helping integrate design and product development data into an ERP system. Finding those vendors that already have those tools is important. For anybody that is looking to be very cost conscious and budget minded, looking at a cloud-based application where it's accessed through the internet is important rather than having the hardware on site. The challenge with the cloud-based application though is making sure that your internet connection is always stable and is fast enough to help you process that information. So that is one thing to be aware of, is that if you don't have good internet bandwidth, an ERP system that is cloud-based does use up a lot of bandwidth. And as your company grows and as you have more transactions, it needs the bandwidth to be able to process that information quickly. So looking for subscription-based monthly payments per user fees rather than a large upfront cost. Finding a vendor that has support in the Middle East and North African region. So whether it is being able to support with live people when you call with a question, or when you text or email with a question, you want to be able to have somebody respond to you right away, especially if it's critical for your business operation. For many of you, having support in Arabic languages is very important because you'd like to be able to allow your employees to call and ask for support, and they might not be comfortable speaking in a different dialect or a different language for a different region. And then also finding something that's modular. So again, the way we talked about ERP at the beginning, where we have a core ERP system and core ERP functionality, but we may want to grow and add more modules later on. So finding something where you're only paying for what you're using, not buying a whole system and only using a part of it. And then another thing that I didn't mention previously is Open API, which is actually just a way of allowing two different applications to communicate with one another and pass information back and forth. So whether you have an e-commerce website where your customers are buying product and being able to integrate that back into your ERP system so you can fulfill those orders quickly and you have an accurate inventory picture, having that ability as opposed to a much more closed off way to communicate, or something that requires a lot of programming to connect those two different systems together. Let's see. All right. Hold on one second. So in terms of our next steps, I don't want you to underestimate planning. It's important to plan a project in advance. It's important to find that vendor that you feel comfortable with. It's important for your business team to feel comfortable with the software application that you're looking at in software demos. Don't underestimate support and training. That too is really important. Your business team is the one that's using the system, so they have to be comfortable using it. They have to feel like they've been trained and are capable of doing the job that you're expecting them to do in the system. That they have support from your software vendor. So in case there are issues, or in case they find something that they need, or new functionality that needs to be added in, that you get the support you need. And if you have data, so what I call data migration. So even if you have data in spreadsheets, you will want to be able to put that information into your ERP system. Whether it's your customers, your vendors, your current purchase orders, your current work orders, your current sales orders, inventory. You don't want to try to manage your business with your old information on a spreadsheet and all of your new information in your ERP system. It's better for you as a business to put all of that information into your ERP system. You'll find your vendor will help you figure out where you need to cut off that data. So I don't necessarily need to have old data in there. I don't need to put old sales orders in there if I've already shipped them. But if I have products that I still manufacture, I certainly want to make sure that that information is in my new ERP system. So simply creating a phased implementation doesn't always guarantee success. So just saying that I'm only going to put in my sales orders and my purchase orders and my inventory in now, and then maybe I'll put in my work in process later, just making something up here, doesn't necessarily work. Thinking that you're going to save time at the beginning by not doing all of the work to put the information into your ERP system up front, you will probably spend more time later on searching for the information you didn't put in and managing it in two places. Also, don't underestimate how long it takes to plan the project. Don't underestimate the support and training. And then in terms of communicating, it's important for your business to know what's going on. They really need to be involved. I can't stress this enough. When I think about where technology implementations fail for a business, it's almost always with your people. If your people don't feel involved, if they don't feel like they know what's happening, they're not going to want to use the system. So communicate, communicate, communicate. That's one of the most important things you can ever do. All right, so planning for technology implementation can be challenging. It can be intimidating. It doesn't have to be, so long as you have good people to work with, you have understanding of what projects like this look like, you know how to plan for it. Determine what problems you're trying to solve. I once asked a client, and I was probably pretty naive when I asked this, but I once asked a client, what issues was he trying to solve? And he gave me a list of 50 things in his business that weren't working. And I thought to myself, well, you're not going to be able to solve all 50 of them up front. But let's see if we can look at what are the 5 most important issues and see if we can solve those. And if by solving those 5 major issues, maybe a bunch of these other issues will just go away because we've been able to solve the bigger issues here and the smaller ones aren't important or have resolved themselves. What are your biggest priorities? Only you will be able to understand that. Only you are going to know what your priorities are, and they're not going to be the same as the next company or your best friend's company or anybody else. They're only your priorities. So you need to figure out what that is going to be, and then know that you cannot fix everything at once. So change is going to take time. It's going to take time to implement the system, and it's going to take time for your business to get used to using a new application. And by keeping them involved, that is going to be the key there. So let's see if I've got anything else here. Nope. I think it's probably a good time for questions. And it looks like we might have a couple of things in the chat here. So hold on 1 second. Okay, got it. All right, so let me ask you if we have some questions. So what can I answer? And I would like to stop sharing and open it up to the video. So if you guys want to pop in.
We have a raised hand from Bulos. So...
Okay, hello Bulos. Good to see you again, Bulos. It's been 24 hours.
Good morning to you. It's good evening for everybody. I would just wanted to thank you about this presentation, because I think it came a little bit late for us, a little bit. But I think it's very challenging to ask a question is, what are the systems internationally sold suitable for fashion? So we can know to have an idea about where to go. Actually, we spend around a year to find the best available solution, which was not the perfect one, because even going with a financial system with the European Bank or something like that, always the consultant was given by the company that will provide the system. So it was like prepared for the system.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, Bulos, and that's kind of challenging, and that's why I don't sell software. I don't I don't work for a software company. I don't take any kickbacks. I don't take any money from software companies because it's important for me, for whoever my client is, to find the right system that works for them. So I have done some research. I found 2 companies right now that meet the criteria. So let me go back to my slide really fast and just show you guys very quickly if I can find it. Share my screen and give me 1 second. So when here we go. I was looking for vendors that have apparel specific ERP systems that are cloud-based, that are subscription-based. So instead of that large upfront cost, it's monthly. That they do provide support in the MENA region, that they have current customers in your region as well, and that they are modular, so that you're only paying for what you have, and that they do both have open APIs. I will, Yasmin, I'm not sure how you want me to do this. Should we just share this at the end with, or share it as an email with links to these vendors? I don't want them to be overwhelmed with requests, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think we can share the links if you want by email. If you can share them with me, I can share with everyone attending today, because I'll be sending them the presentation and a link to the recording after I upload it to YouTube. So I can share with them the links as well in this email. And then we can take it from there. If they look on them and they need your advice in a way or another, then it could be done in one-on-one meetings as we do.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. So I found 2 vendors that to me work for smaller companies, and as you grow, they grow with you. So what I wanted to make sure is that the functionality in the system is easy enough to learn. It doesn't require 15 people doing data entry in a system so that you can just, run your operations. I wanted to make sure that it had all of those specifics. And I found 2 that I have worked with that have been in business for a long time, that have referenceable clients within the Middle East, North Africa region, that have support in those regions. So I didn't want to just send you American companies and say, here, have an American company and everything is in English, and and they might not provide support for you at night because they'll be sleeping. So both of these companies have a good reputation in the industry. And there are other companies. I'm actually speaking with another software vendor on, I think, Tuesday morning as well, to get some details, because they have operations that are also based in Egypt. But I think that's part of the reason why I'm recommending apparel specific companies, because they understand what you're looking for. You're not spending a lot of money having them trying to configure a system to support your needs. System's already set up to work for apparel manufacturing. So Bulos, I hope that answers that question. And I will also send you a meeting for next Saturday or Sunday as well, so we can continue the conversation.
Sure. Thank you, Jill.
Okay.
Actually, we have Bulos, Mr. Bulos, you want to add something, right? Before we move to someone else?
No, I just wanted to clarify. I'm not offending any of the consultants, especially not you, Jill. I mean that always the yes, normally the consultant will be biased to the company that he works with, not fair enough to show all the spectrum of the companies working and providing what you just mentioned. So thank you for the information.
Yeah, of course. And you have to use the software. It would be like me telling you to go and buy a specific car and I don't have to drive the car. There's no point in me telling you that. If I were making money from somebody selling you that car, I can understand why I would tell you to buy that specific car, but I'm not making money and I only want you to find the system that's right for you. So I believe Bakri said you're a medium-sized company. These applications that I'm talking about, Bakri, will support medium and up to large size companies, but it's what we would call scalable. So you can start small and you can expand. The limitation that we used to have on software on ERP systems before it was cloud-based was all the hardware that you would have on site at your place to run it, and how fast it would take to process the information, and how long it takes to back up the data, and a few other things, which is why some systems, we wouldn't call them scalable, meaning it would only work for a small company, and once you had enough transactions, the system would start slowing down. Because these systems are cloud-based, you don't have to worry about processing speed anymore. It's instantaneous. So it allows, you can stay on the same ERP system from 5 users to 500 users if you want to these days. You don't have the same issues that you used to. So I hope that helps. And sorry, let's go ahead and see if there's any other questions.
Yes, actually, we have a question from Adham El Yamani. If you can just unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, everybody, and happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, we have the Egyptian Mother's Day is today. So
Happy Mother's Day to all of you mothers there, which would be Yasmin.
Thank you.
Actually, I had a question, but you already gave an answer.
Oh.
Yes, the other question, and it always stop us to run EP system at our company. Actually, we're a small company, and you can consider it startup company. And we stop at the budget. We hear from very small amount to very large amount. So, what we want to know, what's the reasonable budget we can start with?
So I can't actually answer that properly because both of the companies that we're dealing with, they sell internationally, and I know that they have different pricing based on different regions and countries. I would say it's if you understand us like a sliding scale. So in the US, when somebody tells me it's $250 US per user per month, I think, oh, that's pretty reasonable. That's enough, that I get a lot of software and not a lot of money. If I translate into Egyptian pound, that might be a huge amount of money, and that's too costly for you. These companies have a sliding scale, so they know that in Egypt, they can only afford to charge this much per month per user, rather than in the US where they can charge this much per month per user. I don't know what this much per month per user is because I haven't asked them. So I think if you want to have a conversation with them, we can find out from them, but they're already accustomed to working with a smaller amount for companies in the Middle East and North Africa.
Yeah, and how about support? Even if they're abroad, do you know some companies can do support for this in our country?
Right. So what I asked was of both of these companies is, do they provide support in the MENA region? And both companies, one company has offices in India, which is 4-hour difference time-wise. Another company has offices in Italy, so that's I think 1-hour time difference. And they do have salespeople, and we will have to discuss with them, but I believe that they both can provide support in Arabic. But yes, those were important things to ask. Now, one thing I do want everybody to be aware of is when it's a cloud-based application, I believe with these, when you use a browser, so if you're using, let's say it's Internet Explorer or Google Chrome or, you know, Microsoft Edge, when you're using a browser-based software, you can change your browser into whatever the languages that you would like to see it in. And anything that's standard in your browser should convert into that original, into your browser language. So for me, I want to see it in English, or maybe I want to see it in Spanish. You might want to see it in Arabic. You need to be careful though, in terms of the data that you put into the system, because you can also put your data into the system in Arabic, but when you're in a browser, that browser isn't going to translate the data that you have. So whether it's your vendor's names or your style names or whatever, it's not going to translate that from Arabic into English or Arabic into another language. So it's something to be careful about when you think about how you want to implement these systems, and if you plan to be having transactions with international companies, global retailers, suppliers in different regions, you do need to think about that beforehand. So it's something I forgot to add, and it is important because if you're trying to send information in Arabic and your retailer or your vendor can't translate their system into Arabic, you can sometimes have problems with that.
Okay, one other question.
Yes.
In your presentation, you only talk about cloud system ERP based on cloud. Are they reliable? You know, internet here in Egypt is not very stable, and sometimes it falls for days.
Yeah.
So
that,
if there isn't any option, if I use this cloud system, I can switch to cloud, from cloud to server by any means. I'm not in software or something like that.
It is a good point. I know that internet is not 100% reliable in all locations in Egypt. You can't, some of these applications you can run on your own server. Most companies don't want to do that because that usually requires a different kind of support system, is to have an internal information technology person or a resource that is going to maintain your servers, keep them up to date, do the backups for you, and so on. And then when you try to do an upgrade, when you try to upgrade your application, it takes a lot more work on your end and from that vendor's end. So a lot of companies a lot of software vendors have moved away from server-based solutions. It's not to say that there aren't, and it's not to say that either of these can't run on a server. I think one of them I know does run on a server. It's just what makes sense for you as a business. It is certainly more expensive to do it, to do an implementation and run it on your own server. I will tell you that.
Okay, I'm done, Jill. Thank you very much for your efforts.
My pleasure, Adam.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we are already 7:30. So if we don't have any other questions, so please, if anyone has any other question, please, it's the right time to ask now, because otherwise we will end the session. And of course, later on, if you have any questions, you can share with us by email. But I think it's better that now that we're having Jill with us, that you share your questions if you still have any.
I'm here to ask questions.
Okay, so I think we're done with questions. If no one has any other question, I really thank you very much, Jill, for the very informative presentation of today. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone who attended learned as well. So I really want to thank you for that. And I'm going to share the presentation with you've sent to everyone who attended. And if anyone has any question later on, please share with us by email as well.
And I just wanted to thank you, Yasmin, for the opportunity to present this. I know that it's very challenging for businesses, smaller businesses especially, and especially businesses that have not put in an ERP system. It's a lot of things to think about. I am trying to help simplify it for you. I'm available to talk to if you have questions. And I know it's frustrating, and I know it's hard to figure out where to start. But I can tell you that companies that are using ERP systems, when they're up and running and they've done them correctly, it works very well for them. It frees up your time to be able to focus on your business and build your business rather than spending your time entering data or trying to find information. So there's a lot of benefit for ERP systems for any size company.
Yeah, I'm sure of that. Thank you, Jill. Thank you very much. And as you've said, I'll wait for the links so
Okay.
I can share of the different vendors, so I can share with the people who attended. And even if by any chance you have other links for other vendors that are not supporting Arabic, but you know about, perhaps it could be also like a different section that we can share with companies as well, so they have information about various vendors, and it's up to them to select what they are most comfortable with. I totally agree with you that whenever there is a vendor who is working in the same time zone and have support in the same language of the country, this is the optimum solution. But also we can check if they want to have various options to look at.
And what I would recommend is, for those of you that are going to look at these solutions, if you reach out to them directly, let them know that you're reaching out to them through the ITC program so that they'll understand, because Yasmin and I have been in touch with them and talked about the program, and we've had some of the companies already contact them, but it helps make sense that, this is from the ITC project. This is from, excuse me. So that they'll know why all of a sudden they've got 5 or 10 companies reaching out to them when they hadn't had that before. So it helps. Okay.
Yes, and I thank you, Jill, for pointing out to this. And of course, I think even if they are working in the same time zone, and if they find, for example, if one of the companies, they find they're having a lot of requests from the same country, perhaps later on even if they're working from Italy, as you've said, or from India, they can start having like a representation in the country. So when they see that they are all the companies or the inquiries are coming from the same place, perhaps this can facilitate that as well.
Exactly. And that's the perfect point, Yasmin. As soon as they know that they've got a bunch of customers in one region, it makes it very easy for them to open up an office there, train people, so that, when COVID is over and we can actually see each other face to face, that you have somebody that you know in the region that comes by and makes sure that things are working and gives you that support. So, all right. Well, have a wonderful Mother's Day for those of you who are mothers, or for those of you who have a person in your life who is a mother. Happy Mother's Day. And I will be hopefully seeing you guys at some other point in the future.
Thank you very much, Jill. Thank you very much for this. And thank you everyone for attending today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Have a good day.